Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all here. And once again, I would like to thank TiE Chennai to be able to host this. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Vaitheeswaran with us. All of us know him. He's the father of e-commerce, and there's just a lot to learn from him, his experience, and I look forward to having this conversation with you, Mr. Vaithee. Thank you on behalf of TiE Chennai to agree to be a part of us and part of today's session. And I'm not going to delay anymore. I'm going to move on straight to introducing you to everyone. So, Mr. Vaitheeswaran is the co-founder and co-founder of Again Drinks, and he's also a serial entrepreneur. He's written one of the most popular books, Failing to Succeed, and that's the story of the first e-commerce company in India. And as I've already kind of introduced, he is popularly known as the father of e-commerce in India. He is an internet industry veteran who pioneered the e-commerce industry in India when he co-founded India's first pure-play online retail company, FabMart. So now, if those of you who've been following, FabMart also was eventually rebranded as IndiaPlaza.com in 1999. So his association with e-commerce goes much before the dot-com burst, and he's led various companies towards success in last so many years. I mean, I must say decades. He evangelized Indian e-commerce, scaled the operations, built a strong team, raised funding from leading venture capitalists, and created a strong digital brand in India from scratch, and ran the operations as CEO of India Plaza till 2030. No Indian B2C e-commerce company has survived independently for such a long period, which is very true. And it again gives us the pleasure of, having you here in this crisis time. And I'm sure a lot of questions are waiting for you. In 2002, he co-founded Fab Mall, the world's first online to offline hyperlocal omnichannel grocery retail company. Fab Mall grew to become India's largest supermarket chain, and in 2006 was acquired by the Aditya Birla Group. It was later rebranded as the More chain of stores. The More chain of supermarkets has been acquired by Amazon in 2018. So that's a series of acquisition your baby has gone through. Mr. Vaitheeswaran has advised global brands like Deloitte, Diageo, and Tata Group in their digital initiatives. He is well known in the Indian startup scene and also advises several technology and consumer ventures. He is also a member of the review committee for the Government of India's prestigious project, GEM. For those of you who are looking for the full form of GEM, it's Government E-Marketplace. Mr. Vaitheeswaran is also a renowned TEDx speaker and speaks regularly on entrepreneurship, internet, e-commerce, and consumer marketing related subjects at various industry forums, and has been leading educational institutes across India, including the IIT and IIMs. He's a visiting faculty at IIM Bangalore, and his specialization topic is corporate failures. Very interesting, sir. And is also a member of the Industry Advisory Board of the International Institute of Information Technology, Bangalore, which is IIITB. So he also served on the CII National Committee for Marketing for the period 2012-13, and on the e-commerce committees of FICCI, IAMI, and RAI, the Retail Association of India, and is currently the charter member of TiE Bangalore. So Vaitheeswaran holds an electronic engineering degree from Government College of Engineering, Tirunelveli, affiliated to Anna University. He began his career with Murugappa Electronics, which was an 85 to 89 period, and part of Murugappa and Parry Group, and then spent a decade in Wipro from 89 to 99. And he's scaled across various positions as a part of Wipro before he launched his entrepreneurial journey. In addition, he's also a voracious reader, keen sports enthusiast, and a registered umpire with KSCA for a few years. That's very interesting, sir. His favorite pastime is to watch Test cricket. He listens to Ilayaraja songs and enjoys Liverpool football matches. varied interests. He lives in Bangalore with his wife and sons, and his tweet handle is at YTK. So it's a pleasure to have you once again. And it was actually a real pleasure to introduce you because of your varied presence and I mean you've just really had a great journey.
Thank
So
you so much for having me
yes,
here.
sir.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So I mean I know it's a varied experience that you've had over decades. But what's that one thing that comes to your mind when I say please start relating your experience with something that's really special to you have?
Um, it's very hard to capture one thing, but because a lot of the people who are probably listening and logging in here are entrepreneurs and own businessmen. I think the one thing that I've learned being an entrepreneur over the last 20 years is that there's very little that an entrepreneur cannot achieve if they want to. What I've learned is too much is made of domain expertise, too much of made of experience in a certain area. And I think it's all valid for people who are working in organizations, which is also fine. There's no problem. But if you're an entrepreneur, essentially you're a problem solver. And today, when I look back, I realize that most of the problems that I've managed to solve were in areas that I had no clue about. So to me, that's the one thing that stands out. It doesn't matter which domain you're from. If you're an entrepreneur and you can solve problems, anything can be achieved.
So perfect. So that's a brilliant piece of information to start with. So, sir, your entrepreneurial journey has been a mix of many things. You've been in sales, you've been in marketing, you've been in technology. You've also been a part of Murugappa Group, which is again one of the traditional forms of their operation and the way they look at it. With so many tools that you would have built and with so many lessons that you would have learned, what is that one important tool that you would like to share with our entrepreneurs?
So there is no specific tool that I'm referring to, but I must tell you one thing. It's a question that a lot of people ask me, especially when I go to speak these days, saying you started as an entrepreneur 20 years back, இன்னைக்கு 2020, you started in 1990, and last 20 years என்ன பெரிய சேஞ்ச் ஆயிருக்கு for an entrepreneur in the startup ecosystem? Are the big changes that you have seen? Are things the same? என்ன மாறி இருக்கு, என்ன மாறல? So the one thing that I must tell you, the big change is, and it's related to a tool in that sense, is I think because there are so many tools available, இன்னைக்கு entrepreneurs today can do lot more with lot less. To me, that's the one thing that's changed over the last 20 வருஷமா. என்ன மாறி இருக்குன்னா, இன்னைக்கு நீங்க ஒரு entrepreneur இருந்தீங்கன்னா உங்கள்கிட்ட வெரி லிட்டில் ரிசோர்சஸ் இருந்தாலும் நிறைய பண்ண முடியும். இன்னைக்கு நாங்க ஃபேப்மார்ட் பண்றச்சு 99, we were 6 co-founders. All of them came, all of us 15 years of experience minimum, and it took us a long time to build a small business. Today இப்போ பாத்தீங்கன்னா again drinks, we are just, even today we're selling what we've already sold 100,000 bottles plus in Bangalore. We're just 11 people. So I think the key thing that has changed is not one tool, but the ability of technology, multiple tools. Productivity has changed so much. So today இன்னைக்கு ஒரு entrepreneur இருந்தீங்கன்னா, alone sitting in a room with a phone and a laptop, you can actually run a business, start a business, think of an idea. 20 years back, you couldn't have done. So there's no one tool, but everything has changed so much that anything can be done with very, very little resources. And in tough times like this, it's actually a good thing because it's easier to deal with a crisis today than it was, let's say, 20 years back.
No, that's a very true message, sir, because we probably couldn't have imagined work continuing maybe 10, 15 years ago if COVID had struck us at that point of time. Today, people are still working from home, taking it to the next level, and I really like the specific statement that you made. Today's entrepreneurs can achieve a lot more with a lot less. I mean, of course, I want you to elaborate a little more on that for the benefit of the entrepreneurs who are a part of our audience today. How is it different from what it was from the perspective of achieving a lot more with lot less? And I would also want to ask you one more question along with it is, in today's scenario when entrepreneurs are totally panicking as to what's going to happen with this COVID scenario and whether things are going to move forward, what would be your first advice to them, sir?
So first is, let me answer about how you can do more with less, because they're two different questions. I'll give you one key example. In 99, when we started, we were all coming from different companies, Planet Asia, Wipro, TVS Electronics. 6 co-founders came from there, and then we came together. And our big challenge in the day was to locate an office space and get a telephone connection. And we spent time on it. I know it sounds very funny today, but we actually spent time thinking about what kind of office, how much rent should we pay, where should we start, and how do we apply for a telephone connection. You have to get a bank account. To open a bank account, you need a telephone number. To get a telephone number, you need an address. To need an address, you need a bank account. The bank account guy wants the address. So, you're always constantly in a loop. And we spent enormous amounts of time trying to solve each of them, and then getting 2 landline connections in our office. I think 2 months after we started is when cell phones, those huge cell phones, actually came to Bangalore, and we managed to get some Airtel numbers. Today, 20 years later, that's one thing that we don't even think about. I mean, all of us have phones in our pocket, and the phone is actually the computer. So even if you don't have a laptop, most things can be done. We're not worried about office space. So many co-working spaces are available. And this, I'm talking of a very simple problem. There's a lot more like that, but I'm giving you just a simple example to state just to getting started. Registering a company in those days, you have to go sit with a chartered accountant, get a whole lot of information, and all of today, most stuff can be done online. So, these are 2 very simple examples to say that how you can achieve a lot more with lot less. The far more bigger examples are separate. Let me answer the second question, which is how will people deal with this crisis that is going on, and what? Sorry, yes, please.
Yeah, so a lot of entrepreneurs are today panicking on the current scenario, right? A lot of startups are panicking how they are going to cross the expected depression.
Yeah.
So what would be your thought to them, sir?
Yeah, so the first thing that I want to share with everybody, and this is the most important point of the whole discussion today, is that this will pass. We were faced with the dot-com bust in 2000, 2001, and 2002. From 2000 to 2002 and 2003, things were really, really bad. We were struggling for survival every day. And when we managed to come out of that, when we started Fab Mall, supermarket stores, and they took off, we actually felt that hopefully we will never have to see a challenge like that. And then 2008, the global financial crisis happened. And it was such a horrible time for us. And we came close to shutting down several times, that what we had passed in 2002 suddenly looked fairly easy. Today in 2020, when I look back at the financial crisis of 2008 to 2010, 11, in that period, suddenly you realize when COVID happens that here people are struggling for survival of their lives. It's not about saving the business, it's about saving yourself. So suddenly 2008 looks a lot more easier. The point I'm making is, in the middle of a crisis, things will always look bad, things will always look dark, things will always look gloomy, but time will pass. This will go away. Whether you like it or not, we will find a vaccine, we will survive, we will find a cure, the world will come together, all of this will happen. But a year later, forget a year later, 6 months later, when we look back, it will look like some nightmare, but they will pass and life will look much better. So don't panic, stay calm, time will pass, right? So, like you say in Tamil, idum kadandu pogum. Don't worry.
Very nice, sir. So, during one of our earlier conversations, you mentioned downturns are great reset opportunities. It'll be nice if we can elaborate on that for the sake of our audience.
Yeah. So, I'm going to share with you an anecdote more from sports because I think, irrespective of who we are and where we are, almost all of us follow sports. Cricket may be a very popular sport in India, so let me use that as an example. People will understand. So, if you're a cricket batsman and you're in good form, if you look back at your videos, you'll find that the way you're batting, you're perfect. I mean, good sportsmen, successful sportsmen, when they're batting well, you go back and look at their videos, they'll be perfect. I mean, the head will be still, the bat will move in an arc, the leg will go to the foot, will go to the pitch of the ball. It will be absolutely perfect. And that purple patch will last for a few years and you'll score a lot of runs. Then suddenly, out of the blue, you'll start scoring less runs, then you'll get out of form, and then you'll suddenly realize what happened. I'm not even able to score anything. I was doing so well. So during those times, when you go back and you look at your videos, you would have realized that in good times, people actually get into bad habits. It's a very common human tendency. Sportsmen do that. So in good times, batsmen, when they're scoring runs, suddenly you feel that as if nothing can go wrong. Anything that they hit, they will hit in the middle of the bat. And after some time, they're getting more expansive. Bad habits come in. In other words, the foot is no longer going to the pitch of the ball. The head is no longer still. You don't realize it, and suddenly it starts affecting your batting. So, uh, what these people do is they take their videos, they go back and say, look at the videos, then take the current videos and realize here are the mistakes you made. These are called bad habits. Businesses are exactly like that. Entrepreneurs do exactly the same thing. In good times, you have raised a lot of capital, you have money in the bank, suddenly you spend a little bit more on marketing. You invest a lot more on building brand. You give more discounts. You are less careful about collecting money. In fact, you get lazy. Okay, what is has to be collected in 15 days can be collected in 30 days. You hire people at salaries higher than what the market pays. You suddenly get competitive and say, I want to hire the vice president from my competition. I'm willing to pay him 50% more. So they're all good things that happen and they don't impact you in good times. But these are bad habits. Suddenly, when a crisis like this happens, you look back and you suddenly realize I got into so many bad habits, you start correcting them. These are called reset opportunities. So in times like this, what happens is in a crisis like this, an entrepreneur is forced to go back to her drawing board and relook at every aspect of her business. What are the things that I'm doing? What are the things where I'm being profligate? Are there areas that I can survive without spending so much? Do I really need to hire so many people at expensive salaries? Why do I have 8 people in support services when I can do with 4? These are those I call reset opportunities, areas where you can now relook at and say, I can do without them and it will actually not impact my business. This is, in a sense, going back to the basics. If you're a batsman and you start your career in school, you're saying, foot always to the pitch of the ball. And as long as you're doing that, you'll do well. When you get into bad habit, the foot is no longer going to the pitch of the ball. So, crisis like this, you basically go back and remove the bad habits and go back to fundamentals and good habits. And it allows you an opportunity to reset the business. So that's what I meant. It's a great opportunity. I actually think that every single entrepreneur must go through a crisis in their lifetime. I'm not saying they must go through a virus like this because this is a far more complex issue. But from a business point of view, crisis is good. If a business does not go through a downturn, it does not build a steel. Businesses need steel to survive. And steel is never built in good times. Steel is always built in bad times. So one downturn in a business makes a business stronger. If you only go through good times, your business is not ready to survive and not ready to compete. So I think crises like this are good. Like I said, I want to repeat, I'm not saying COVID-19 is good, but I think crises are good for businesses to become stronger.
You are a veteran, sir. So you are able to easily make the statement of crisis is good for an entrepreneur, which has a much deeper meaning. I would like to link two questions to this, sir. Of course, one after the other. One, you spoke about resetting the good or the bad habits that they picked up at the good times, right? So when the times were good, they were able to hire beyond the market price, and now they may have to figure out a way to either let go of them or relook at their strategy of hiring, which talks about the organization structure, how they should structure their organization in crisis scenarios like this. Two, where do they get money from? Because customers are again going to delay payment. They can't let go of their customers because that's their only hope for cash flows in the future. So, how do you think they should plan? Entrepreneurs should plan their cash flows. Maybe that will be my first question to you, and then I'll request you to talk about how they can plan their organization structure.
Yeah, sure. Let me talk about cash flow. I think it's a very important point. Um, there are two key financial parameters that impact a business. One is cash flow and the other is gross margins. Actually, everything else from a financial point of view are all irrelevant. People talk of sales, people talk of revenues, people talk of gross merchandise value. None of them matters. The only thing that matters is gross margins and cash flows. So in good times, entrepreneurs must focus on gross margins because cash flow is not an issue. In times like this, you must reverse the logic and say, let me focus on cash flows instead of gross margin. I'm going to give you an example of what we did in 2008. So when we were running India Plaza, we were very focused on building credit terms because we had raised. I've never been a big fan of raising large sums of money. So because we had restricted capital, we said we must make the capital go longer. So typically what we would do is that we would go and negotiate for good payment terms with the credit terms with the suppliers. Let's say, I'm taking books as an example because an industry that is fairly classic and has not changed too much over the years. Typically, a retailer can get anywhere between 25 to 40% margin depending on volumes, and they can get credit between 30 to 90 days. In those days, typically we would go and negotiate for about 30, 40% margin, and you'll have about 90 days credit. So in good times, you would focus on margins and not worry about the payment terms because if we could make that money and we had some capital in the bank, we would pay our vendors early enough. Now, in this case, because suddenly we are faced with the crisis, we realized we needed the cash upfront. We wanted to turn our cash longer. So we would go back and tell those people, look, I don't need the 40% margin. I'm happy to compromise and bring it down to say 25% margin or 30% margin. But for this 10%, can I pay you 90 days later because I can turn my money around 3-4 times. So this is a very simple example. In good times, it's okay if your money goes out faster and comes in later. In bad times, your money must come in faster and go out later. So which means today you focus on cash flows and payment terms, and tomorrow when things change, you go back and renegotiate saying, I'm focusing on gross margins again. And I think depending on what business you are and how much are their credit terms, people can play this out. But it's a very, very important rule. Already in Again Drinks, we started talking to our retailers and saying that, look, you are paying us in 30 days or 45 days. We can give you higher gross margins on our product. Can you pay us in 15 days? Because we expect cash to get tighter. So obviously from their side, they would like to pay later. For them also cash flows would get stuck. But it's a matter of sitting across the table and arriving at something that works for both of you. But the key is, the parameter is there's a gross margin and there's a cash flow. You have to figure out in times like this, cash flow is more critical than gross margins. In good times, gross margin is more critical than cash flows. What is the second question you asked?
Yeah. So before I go to the second question, I would just like to repeat what you said, because it's actually a brilliant piece of advice for most of us, that in good times, it's okay to focus on gross margin, even though cash comes in late. But in times like these, it's important to lower your margin and be able to elongate your cash cycle. It's a very good piece of advice, sir. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
So my second question, which I asked you, was how do we plan the organization structure? We've hired in the past expensive resources, hoping that they'll be able to bring in larger revenue in the future.
Sure.
But now we may need them, or we might even we might have even matured. The entrepreneurs might have even matured that we really don't need such an expensive resource. Now, at a situation like this, when we can't even project our future really well, how do we restructure our organization?
Yeah, that's the tougher question, because any answer, any action that you take is bound to lead to heartburn. But that's the challenge with a crisis. There are no happy answers here. Um, you must try and so you'll see a lot of advice in the newspaper saying, everybody saying, don't let people go. These are times when they need your help and all of that. So there is a humanitarian angle to it. There's a sympathy and empathy angle to it. But don't ever forget, as an entrepreneur, you should never confuse charity with business. You should never keep people on your roles and keep your headcount going and keep paying salaries because everybody is performing charity for COVID-19. I mean, don't confuse. I think the business needs to be treated as a business and your charity needs to be treated separately. If you want to be charitable to people, then you must do it with your own money outside the business. You cannot make the business suffer because you're trying to do charity. I find that advice a lot of people giving in the newspapers. I personally disagree with it. I think the only decision an entrepreneur must take during these times is what is good for the business. If it means that you have to let go of people, you have to let go of people. Please don't say, I can't do that because, the government is telling me that I must employ everybody because they are all struggling and I must pay them. Because the reality is, if you keep everybody and you pay them, you won't be around. And the only way you can help 5 people doing charity out of your own money is if you are around. If your business is not around, anyway, you can't help people. So please be very tough on these things. It doesn't mean that you have to lose sympathy and empathy for the people, but the point I'm making is, if you think you have to let go of some senior people, expensive people, you have to let go of them. Second, one person, senior person, may actually be drawing the salary of, say, 5 people. You have to be very clear, who do you want at this time? In times like this, sometimes it is easier to do with 5 lower cost resources, delivering a lot more value than one senior person who in good times would have brought in big revenue, but today there's no revenue to bring in. So, if you have to let go of that person, you should do that. But I'll tell you a better thumb rule that entrepreneurs can follow. And I found this very, very useful. I think what happens is, in normal times, not more than 50 to 60% of people actually bring in revenue in a company. When I'm saying revenue, means these are people who are directly or indirectly involved in impacting sales and incoming revenue. This could be sales, this could be marketing, this could be business development, all of. But there are a whole lot of support services, such as people, such as human resources, such as regulatory, compliance, finance, administration. And I'm not saying that these functions are less, so don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But the fact of the matter is, in good times, about 60% of the people in a company are typically involved indirectly or indirectly bringing in revenue, and the 40% are in support services. In times like this, I would redraw the organization and recraft the people such that 80%, minimum 80% of the people are involved indirectly or indirectly bringing in revenue. Does it mean that you have to let go of people who are in human resources? Not necessarily. So I'll give you some examples. In 2008, when we went to a very tough period, I remember an HR manager, and she had been with us for a few years, a very smart lady, but we were neither hiring nor doing anything. So we didn't need the HR manager. But she was a very smart lady. She had done an MBA from a reasonably good college. And I went and told her, look, you have 2 choices. I don't need you today, but I'm not going to let you go. If you can take a function which brings in sales and revenues for us, apart from what you're doing, I have no problem in your continuing. I offered the same thing, I remember, to the finance manager. because there wasn't any cash flow coming. We didn't need one head of finance with two finance managers. We didn't need them. Both the finance manager and the lady who was in HR, both of them took up the challenge and actually got into areas of business development. So instead of doing HR, instead of doing finance, they actually went out and got business. And when times change again in 11 and 12, when we raised money and things became better, they went back full time into HR and finance. So suddenly what happened is the percentage of people in an organization bringing in revenues directly or indirectly jumped for about 85% for us. So I would use this, I would recraft the organization saying, in today's times, are 80% of the people minimum in the company directly bringing in revenues? If not, you have to change your organization. You cannot afford to have more than 20% of the people being in a function outside of revenue generating. If it's higher than 80%, then you're doing very well. But the minimum is 80%. So keep that rule, recraft roles, recraft responsibilities. In case you have to let go people, you have to let go people.
Very interesting, actually, sir, because you were able to retain your senior talent and as well as utilize them to generate revenue.
Yeah.
Very interesting piece of advice.